Hi Neil, welcome Neil to our webinar. This is your first webinar. It's
Yeah,
great
glad to be here.
It's actually great to have you here. It's quite a privilege to have somebody with your esteem on our webinar. So it's really exciting for all of us. But I don't think the people are here to listen to me. They're here to listen to you. So let's get started with some of your questions. And then if anybody's got any questions or want to ask Neil any questions, please message us on the Zoom chat or the Q&A session, and we will and we'll ask you all the questions. Okay, so now let's get started. So let's just go through a little bit about where it started, who you are. So as a youngster, so you used to play football. How did it start that you started playing football?
Yeah, I was privileged to grow up in KZN, with climate that lends itself to a number of sports, which is quite interesting enough. But football was always my first love. My brother was a professional. He's 7 years my senior. And so from the age of 9, I was really experiencing the professional outlook to the game. So the early days were very special for me because school's football was very well structured. And club football was well structured in KZN. And so it lent itself to really good foundation, together with playing in the park every afternoon. And I was very fortunate playing in the park with all different races. And now you got to talk, I go back a long way in my age, way back into the early 70s when I was playing in the park. And it was great to play with all different races, although we weren't a democratic South Africa. And was still in the apartheid days. But my early days in football, I was very privileged to have good setups and good foundations where you could play club structures, school structures with league formats. And the league format is vitally important for the competition levels. So that is vitally important. But just the big overall spectrum of having the facilities is also vitally crucial to the development of the game.
Neil, you didn't only excel in football, you excelled in multiple sports. What sports did you excel in?
Well, yeah, I was lucky because as coming back to that park environment, you would just go down in any afternoon and see what sport was getting played. Obviously very seasonal. As I said, KZN climate, you could play all year round because the climate was very good. But I excelled in cricket, obviously football, baseball, softball, hockey. I got all national school and provincial colours for all those different sports. I enjoyed the golf side of it. So anything with a ball, I enjoyed. But football was always my first love.
So, I mean, you kind of half answered this question, but you could have actually played other sports, professionally. Why did you choose football? I mean, you kind of already answered it, but there's a bit more to your answer, isn't there?
There is. Because my brother Mark was such a thorough professional. As I said, I was brought up in his environment, but more so from I was privileged to play with an older age group because in the park, and I got knocked around, and I learned. You have to learn very quickly about the game. But my life around the professional game was always there from a young age, and I had good coaches, I had good structures in Durban City and in Virginia United in those days. Well-structured clubs, club football, and that lent itself to finding a niche into the game of football. But yeah, I think football was always my first love.
You've actually just come up with the question that I've got to ask. Some people, one of the reasons why people choose a certain sport is that the structures are done correctly, where the kids are treated correctly, and they know that they've got a game on a certain day and practices on a certain day, and there's a good structure to the game. How important is it, and even with your experience now later on, how important is getting the structures and for a kid to fall in love with the sport?
Vital, absolutely vital. It lends itself to good training sessions. When you have good structures, it lends itself for coaches to become more and more involved. The coaches want to be more and more qualified because they have a structure to work within. And then they can improve their knowledge by watching other coaches, because obviously it's through different age groups, and there's that interaction between coaches, which is absolutely vital. Coaching is not about all just keeping it to yourself. It's about sharing the knowledge, delving into more knowledge, exploring boundaries, and learning every single moment of your coaching career. And obviously you have to learn as a player and develop yourselves. But not only that, you have to be very, very wary when you have that competitive level. As I said, the structures are there for competition level. That's when you can guard yourself and see how far you are, not only as a player, but as a coach. And I must reiterate, it's not all about winning, obviously. But it is born within us to have that competitive spirit, to be competitive. As a youngster, you want to win your league that you're playing in. You want to be the best that you can be. And it's important to, coming from a coaching perspective, also to know very, very quickly within your group the different levels of play from each of the individuals, because it's not use pitting very, very good players and putting them in amongst the training schedule with lesser quality players, because this is going to bring them down, and the lesser players will also get a bit frustrated because they're not of that talent. So as a coach, you have to quickly identify the different categories which you would place the players in, so that you can have a training session that would be both informative and joyful and fun, especially in the younger years for teams and for club football. You want the players to enjoy themselves, because the minute they're not enjoying themselves, they're going to go and try to find other sports or try to find other activities to take part in. So it's vitally important that they enjoy it, that your sessions are different, not all the same, and being able to run through with the youngsters both the environment of teaching them the correct methods from a young age. That foundation will lend itself to a really, really good, some of them going into the professional game and wanting to stay part of that, the game of football, in my regard, stay part of the football process all through the age groups.
Well, going back to your story, now you played soccer you started playing soccer during the apartheid era, and you chose to play for the NPSL as opposed to like a specific white-only league. Why did you do that, and what were the benefits of that?
You know, I don't know if not many people realize the pathway of South African football. You know, yes, we were living in apartheid days with initially you had the four different leagues, the Coloreds, the Indians, the Whites, and the Black leagues. But in 1978, those four leagues got together and amalgamated and became the NPSL, the National Professional Soccer League. So there was, although the country was still in the dark days, the football was a leading sport in bringing people together, bringing all races together. And so that happened in 1978, although we only became a democratic country in 1994. So we had already this pathway of all the different cultures and racial groups coming together and playing. Yes, it was difficult because the clubs were still pretty much a white club, a black club, a colored, an Indian club. But now you had the introduction, and then it started to become from all walks of life, different colors and racial groups coming together in the formation of that club. So the white club started to have more black players, Indian players, colored players, and the black clubs had more white players, and there it was, the coloreds, and everybody was amalgamating. And so the game of football grew a lot quicker in that kind of aspect to our country. And we had some really, really interesting moments where you as a club, you'd go into to play a match, and some of your players weren't allowed to go into that hotel. We had to actually wait until dark, and you used to squeeze them through the back doors into book extra rooms and put them and bring them into their hotels. So it was really trying times, but good aspects about it too.
So football pretty much set the standard that other sporting codes are still even trying to follow now. And football started long beforehand.
They did. They were the leaders in that demand. And you had to learn. And you know, you don't, as I mentioned earlier, I was playing in the park with all these different, guys, racial platforms in which I did not know when I was a youngster at 8, 9, 10, playing in the park, how that would influence my later life in terms of my professional career, playing with, you know, in the same aspect with all different races and being in an apartheid country.
So what was it like when you eventually came up to Joburg and you joined Kaizer Chiefs, and what was your relationship with the fans?
Yeah, it was a great time for me. I'd already been playing 10 professional seasons when I joined Kaizer Chiefs. I started my professional career in 1980, 81. And I joined Chiefs in 1990. And I moved from KwaZulu-Natal up to Johannesburg. You know, during my younger days as a professional, we weren't part of the international footballing arena. We were out of FIFA. We weren't part of FIFA. So my dream then was obviously to play professional football for the best and the most successful club in the country, that being Kaizer Chiefs. I did not have international dreams at that stage. So Chiefs was a big stepping stone for me. Once again, a cultural change. Had to move up to Gauteng, the family up to Gauteng, to Johannesburg, and to settle down in a new club environment that I wasn't really used to. This club was laden with stars. Guys that were the top players. They used to win trophy after trophy, season after season. So it was very, very, very tough and difficult in my first year, as it would be in any club format where you join a new club to settle down with new players that you're not used to. But you spoke about the fans. Now, the fans were obviously very, very demanding fans. They were used to success. So they demanded success from the players. But once you had got their belief in you, it was really plain sailing. They used to love you as a person, both on and off the field. They used to cherish your qualities. Yes, I was not technically gifted like some of my fellow colleagues and Dr. Kamala, the Ace Kuzis and the like, Ace Nslwengwe, teenage toddlers. I was not gifted technically like them, but I had my role to play from my fierce competitiveness that I used to play in the midfield, because I started with them in the midfield, and my ability to pass over long distances and to read the game, which was vitally important in the game of football. So soon I had the fans behind me, and within 2 years I was captain of Kaizer Chiefs. So, and I had a very privilege to play 10 years for Kaizer Chiefs. So, but a wonderfully beautiful experience. Cultural experience was wonderful.
I think with the modern day youngsters, the guys want to achieve very quickly. They want to get to the top within the first practice kind of thing. How do you because you've gone through it where you had to start off at the bottom of Kaizer Chiefs and work your way up. How did you, what do you recommend to coaches to when they get a new superstar player and the guy has to still earn his ropes into the team? How do you actually do that? And what do you recommend from a psychological perspective to help these kids out?
Yeah, obviously it's communication. Communication is absolutely vital, that you continuously to communicate, because when you initially come into any environment, you're going to make mistakes, and it's great to make mistakes because you only learn from mistakes. But if you have your coaches there to encourage you, to say, look, the more mistakes, and it's a funny game, football, you want your players to have touches on the ball, and the more touches on the ball, the more mistakes you're going to make. So, but then the more better passes you're also going to produce, and better moments you're going to produce, because you're touching the ball more often. So it's all about encouragement and always working on the better aspects of that player, not touching on his mistakes, but more on what he did well. And then slowly the belief will come and say, you know, obviously in the professional game, it's all about, you know, why we bought you as a player. Why did you come to this club as a player? What are your qualities? What are you going to give to this team? Because as you know, the Kaizer Chiefs, as I said, were very, very gifted players. But you also need a solid foundation in any organization. You need that solid foundation that's going to do the dirty work, if I can call it that. So it was important to have different combinations of play, different thought processes, and that's what you've got to bring across to that player. Always his ability to do well and what's making him a good player.
So you mentioned something quite keen, and that is communication. So setting up for kids, like even though they'd be coaching kids and stuff, and more maybe in the high school kids, setting up a system where you can explain to the kids what the idea for the year is, what you want to do for the year is, how do you set it up in smaller goals. How will a coach set up something like that?
Yeah, obviously he's got to go through. With youngsters, it's difficult. Not difficult, it's different in the perspective that you have shorter periods of time in which to have them with you. You know, you can't go in the professional game. You'll have your different components of pre-season and then developing into the competitive phase, working them into the competitive phase, and then out of the competitive phase in the rest periods. But with youngsters, you don't really have too much time with them, and you want to just use their general fitness levels that they have as young players, work with it. But it's all around working players with the ball factor. You've got to work with the balls, with the football itself, because it's a technical game. You want them to develop their technical skills. And at the same time as developing the technical skills, you can develop their fitness just by using the balls. And they won't even realize it. As I said, coming back to the enjoyment factor, which is absolutely vital. Work with the balls continuously with our youth. And then you can, as you see the different levels, obviously from the 6 to 12 age group, I said, you just want to introduce them, obviously, more touches on the ball, more compact spaces, because obviously the field should be smaller and the goals smaller, and all the areas as you go through the age groups, you progress with them in the different sizes of the field, the different numbers that are participating so that they have more touches, and you develop their thing. And then when you get to the 12, 13, you can start talking about the fundamentals of the game itself, the aspects of the tactical awareness, and start working gradually through, you know, even a little bit slightly earlier. It depends, once again, on the quality of players that you have, the understanding. Some you just want to have fun and enjoyment. Some are now grasping those tactical elements of the game from a much younger age. So you as a coach have to identify how your team is collectively, and as an individual collective, working with the defensive units, the midfielders, how they combine and work together with the attacking unit. So both when you have the ball, when you don't have the ball, and that gets brought through gradually through the age groups, and teaching them the correct methods and how to work in different groups collectively, and still have that individual capacity of a person to do something brilliant in the game, to change the game. And then also coming on to the set plays, which are so vitally important, the understanding of set plays, corner kicks, free kicks, throw-ins, and that, you know, so that gets brought in during a later era of 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age for our youth, as we talk in youth. So, I think that's vitally important. But the dimensions of youth is fun. Let them work at the ball technically, so that they don't start thinking about, we're just running. Football, you can work with the ball and still not realize how much work you're doing off the ball and on the ball.
A couple of questions from our attendees. One is from Yoga, who says, what role did school sport play in your development as a sports person?
Yeah, school structures are vital. Yeah, you know, coming from all aspects, as I said, a structured environment within the school where you can play inter-schools football, and then to have the teams picked and then to play either on a Wednesday afternoon with other schools in a small league, whether you work clusters. Obviously, a lot of schools, because there's loads and loads of schools in South Africa. We have over 29,000 schools. So you've got to cluster them into, especially now that we don't have the infrastructure that I was privileged to have as a youngster, where I had 31 fields in one area of Kingsmead and Durban. Now we don't get that. You don't know, you get the small clusters of 4 fields, 2 fields. So you've got to structure your school's football in clusters where you can spend the time, your different times to have different clusters playing. And so schools football is vital. And in South Africa, we've lost our way on that somewhat. We need to get that back. And in terms of where I say we've lost it, it used to be a fundamental part in the school curriculum. And we lost it when physical education got taken out of schools. It's back into schools now. There's a lot of discussion with the Department of Basic Education and Sport and Recreation, and obviously Safa now, to try and get the school structures back in place, and how we're going to develop the coaches within those schools, so that you have school teachers that have the basic and fundamental idea of how to coach youngsters. And we're talking about the Safa Cap D license and C license, which will take you through the different ages of the D license between 6 and 12 years, and the CAF C license between the ages of 13 to 15. And then obviously you can progress your coaches up the coaching ladder when you identify, as I say, more quality. And it's fundamental in that process also to bring about the competition levels where you're always going to have the better teams. Try play strength versus strength leagues, academies versus academies, and then but you've got to identify it within your clusters and how you're going to progress them up the ladder.
Now, this is a similar question to what you've already answered, but there's a couple more parts to it. Is why, this is from Norman, why doesn't Safa have a development structure in the country? He's asking us because the clubs and national team are really struggling. Is it a problem with the coaching system or in our country, or is the club structures or Safa structures the problem? He says that according to him that football is dying in the country, and how can we improve to the standard of football that we can compete in European countries?
Yeah. Unfortunately, Norman is correct in a certain way. There are structures, but the football has lost its importance at school level. And the development, what he's talking about, Norman's talking about, is that, like I said, in my day, I was lucky to have the school programs and the club programs. Whereas now that's lost the school program. We need to get the school programs so that it dwells, and then there's more identified youngsters are coming about. There are programs. I set up programs when I was the Safa technical director with our provincial technical officers, where I placed these technical officers were one of the highest coaching badges in the country. They were placed in all the provinces to make sure that these school football structures could take place again. Get them. It was their job to find it out and see where they could help with the schools and in the development of the game. The club football, how are we going to develop the club coaches, get the coaching badge, coaching courses developed in their provinces. These guys, as I said, were all instructors, so they were paid by Safa, and so that took the burden off the coaches to pay more money for these coaching courses. So it was all those aspects of the technical, to have workshops, to have seminars, to bring coaches together. So yes, a lot more can be done. The structures are there, but I believe it needs to be brought in from the provinces. They need more technical people. He was also part of those provincial technical officers were asked to put regional technical officers in place, which will then put instructors in place both regionally and local, with the local LFAs. And that was all part of the structure. They were very much into that program, so it was never going to be a 2-year program. It needs to be over a course of time to get, as you say, to get our national teams into a better position to have more identified players. But having said that, you're always going to have your better players, and we've got to put them into more structured development centers where they are getting coached at a better level day in, day out. And when they're in that environment, professional environment, you're going to get more players into the professional game. Remember, there's only 1,000 professional footballers in our country, 500 with the National First Division and another 500 in the PSL. Because you've got 16 teams, if you look at around 30 professional players, it's 480 in each league. In that facility, 500, 550 in each league. So it doesn't lend itself to loads and loads of professional players. Although we also have sent youngsters overseas into the European leagues, which adds to that number, probably in around, I would say, in around 1,200, 1,300 professional players at this stage. And but our national teams have been getting better and better. I think there's a really, really great crop of national team players coming from the junior age groups. But we need to really put a better structure in from playing academy versus academies and school high performance centers playing against them and putting them into those structures both provincially, and then you can add it to the national structure.
And I see it's working very well in women's sport, because we've got a couple of women now playing in some of the top leagues in Europe.
Yeah, they've come through nicely. There was a gap. There was a gap in the women's game where we used to have the regional women's league and then the Safa league, which was a provincial league. And then you had the Banyana. Now there's a national women's league, which will just put that little league in between the Safa league and Banyana in terms of the quality. And I think in the next 5-6 years, you're going to see more players come out of that structure, especially if we can align that structure to our professional league, the PSL, and with the clubs that have that professional environment, so that they have professional facilities in which to make themselves both fitter, better equipped to become national team players. And I see you're going to see a bigger group of women players come through. But we once have to, what we're doing, and I must reiterate what I discussed earlier with the provincial technical officers that are placed in the provinces. There wasn't only a male technical officers, there were also female technical officers. So it was also to grow the game of women's football within the schools and in the club structures within the country.
Coach B's got a question. He says that how does a coach build their coaching career to make it in football? He says that we see a lot of young coaches, but they're not coming through into the pro level. What is one way that we can get more coaches advancing, and or if they can be part of a coaching agency that you know of that can help them get to a high level and eventually coach the PSL?
Yeah, it's a difficult world, the coaching world. As I said, there's not many, you can't have many professional coaches. I said there's 16 NFD clubs, 16 professional clubs. So within that environment, you've got 32 head coaches, and with his assistants, you've got 64, 70 coaches maybe in that professional game. What they need to do is obviously get themselves more empowered, go and align themselves and spend time with the professional clubs to see how they work. All the professional coaches would welcome the amateur coaches to come and spend a week, 2 weeks with them in their environment, come and watch and learn and ask questions to progress their knowledge. But the most important is to equip themselves with the coaching courses, and then even progress and look overseas. Go get your scope overseas. Spend some time. I'm sure there's environments overseas. There are, coming back to his question about getting agents to look after them, but you've got to show you don't just come into the professional game without the knowledge. So you've got to progress up the ranks. The professional teams will look at, get into a structure that's an academy-like structure, which will be at the highest level of youth. And then you working with the youth structures in these clubs. And the minute you starting to achieve results, both where you're working in your own environment, you will get noticed. It's a very, very difficult profession where the coaches are, it's all over the world. It's not just a South African phenomenon. It's all over the world. You get the roller coaster of coaches that stay within one country. They just go from club to club, unfortunately. But there are nowadays a lot more South African coaches, turnaround of different coaches coming through.
Coaches are also the first people to get blamed for everything. Rafiq has asked a question. Now, this is a little bit between the Safa SASFA kind of idea, but she says, it's your experience as a former technical director. What role is Safa actively playing in school soccer development, especially from under 15 downwards, including relationships with stakeholders like Danone, Coke, those kind of guys?
Yeah, and I think I touched on it a little bit earlier with regards to Safa have now engaged with the Department of Basic Education. They have got a schools football committee where they never had that 2 years ago. That committee must align itself both provincially and regionally so that they can get the role players. And in that schools committee are not people outside of the school environment. They all are teachers or headmasters that are in the school environment that know what to do within their clusters and to set up the school programs. It's just about getting those people more active to form their smaller subcommittees within the provinces and within the regions. That's needed so that they can discuss how we're going to get those different levels from what I spoke about earlier into schools football, then schools football playing in clusters, and then getting into the provincial. So obviously when you have your schools playing against each other in the different, as you said, Danone, Coca-Cola, you could have the winners of those clusters. Then you have better teams and better schools coming to represent the provincial winners in as I said, within the Coke and Danone and those competitions. But you want to see, yes, that's the end result of having a really, really good school structure. But you want to see more schools football played, more schools playing in a structured, well-run league format. Once that gets done, then you're going to see better equipped representation in those competitions, in the end result competitions.
Now, here's a question from Ricardo Katza. Now, first, before I get to his question, how important is it to see ex-professional players like him going to schools like Grey College and teaching and growing the game within schools that are not considered as the traditional kind of footballing schools, even though they've been playing football since the 70s, but they're not considered that. They're considered like a rugby school. Now, Ricardo's come in, he's changed the structures, and as an ex-player, he's bringing all his expertise back into school football. How important is a person like him?
It's vital, because we want all our ex-professionals to come back and give back to the game. And Ricardo had a wonderful career, and his knowledge coming back. But what he's also done exceptionally well, he's gone through the coaching courses. He's equipped himself. Yes, as a professional, you'll know the professional environment. But even if you ask Ricardo himself, he will tell you those courses were of immense value for him. The foundation was laid of the environment for him. And now he set up a wonderful program at Grey in Bloemfontein, and he's been rewarded from him. He's one of the programs that's been that I had with FIFA. FIFA are doing a look at the top academy structures within our country and doing surveys on what structures they have in place. And he's having to dig into his reserves, give them knowledge. So there's a whole lot of surveys, and FIFA have come in, and they're going to come in and do a program and work with them to equip Grey College better and to make them a better organization as what they are today. And you just have to look at Grey College being totally coming out of a rugby environment to having one of nearly over 30 football teams. And that's wonderful, and we need more of that happening. So Ricardo's done a wonderful job, but that just tends to show you that he would be recognized, coming to that question that was earlier put to me about how do you progress up to be in the coaching structure. Ricardo will get noticed. The more he works together and gets a better football program within Grey's College, he will get noticed, and he will come into the structures at a later time. But he's doing wonderful work.
So Ricardo's question is, what is your take on kids going from school to universities to pursue an education and play football at 18 years old and play for clubs 3 or 4 years later, instead of going to a club where the focus will be on football instead of a holistic view on life? If we look at the Varsity Cup, it's a good platform to get that physical development before competing in a club structure.
We've always spoken about, and the question is absolutely vital. You need to have top footballers nowadays need to holistically have that holistic ability, and education gives them that. We can't reiterate it more, and coaches must reiterate it more with their players, that they need to go to school, they need to go through the education process, and above all, they need to equip themselves, because football is only a shortened career. Not many footballers go in to become coaches. You want them to become coaches, but professional coaches where you can earn a living from coaching. So there's only a small number that are spoken about. So it's vitally important that education plays a role, and then even take it to the tertiary education and the levels of varsity, and to equip yourself so that when you can combine the two, become a coach and have your own business, or go into the own line of earning capacity. But it's vital as players as well, so that if you want to become a professional footballer, that when the media come to talk to you, you can equip yourself and talk eloquently about the game of football, because you have a knowledge, and have a knowledge about the game, and have knowledge about the broader society as well. So it's vital, and varsity football plays a huge role. It's an area where a lot of players get tapped for the professional game. So and the varsity area can lend itself into a lot of aspects about not only becoming a coach, but becoming a nutritionist, or becoming working in the sports science of the game. Becoming a trainer, physical trainer, and all the different elements, lending itself to surveys about the game, to broaden the databases. There's so much areas of the game that you can now get into it, become a physiotherapist, whatever you can. You get the education, you can still get back into the game of football at the highest level, but maybe not as a coach.
This is a bit of a follow-up onto it. So you've answered most of this question. So what qualifications do you have?
Well, I went and got a Safa pro license. I did a professional license. And I was fortunate enough to do that with the DFB instructors, which are international instructors working with FIFA, and Horst Krieter and Michael Nies. They're working all over the world for FIFA. And I was privileged of one of 53 of it was done over two courses in 2011 and 2012. So I have a Safa Pro license. I've also been in Germany and then in Hennef, where I worked once again with Horst Krieter on a German course, UEFA B license or UEFA B level in German football. So, yeah, I was lucky. But most of all, what I did as a player, each coach always, each of my professional coaches always had the good points about them that I could take as a player and then add it into my coaching repertoire, but add my own touch to that as well. So I wanted to expand on an exercise. I'd say that coach had that attacking from wing play. How can I add on to it, add another element of my own touch, which is vital for a coach? Coaches mustn't copy. They can have a look what other coaches do, get the fundamental outline of that exercise or whatever they're trying to accomplish in that training session, but add their own touch to it. And that's vital to add your own touch.
Tepa asks, why is the average age in the PSL so high?
I think it's coming from the structure, what we're talking about, and I've spoken about it before. The clubs in our country, the PSL clubs, I'll just go to PSL clubs, the 16 PSL clubs. How many of them have an infrastructure running from the age of 6? Orlando Pirates under 6s, Chipper United under 8s, Black Leopards under 10s. I'm just going through different clubs. We don't have that. They're not clubs. They are teams. Until we get club structure in our country. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, Supersport United have it. Kaizer Chiefs have a lot more. They still need to do more, going through all the age groups. Pirates have it. But a lot of them only have the Diski League and their senior team. Now, how can you get younger players wanting to play for that club if they don't come through an environment? I'm coming back to my younger years. I played for Durban City under 8s, under 10s, under 12s. That Durban City was my first professional club. My inspiration there was to play for that professional club. Watch that professional Durban City play on the weekend and watch how those professional players do it. Wearing that Durban City jersey, which was a blue and white hoop jersey, I wanted to put that on for my club. So coming back to the question, why are there not as many younger players? Yes, one of the aspects is that we don't have the professional clubs embarking on that huge youth structures of all the different age groups, wanting the youngsters to wear that jersey professionally, plus also adding on to what I spoke about earlier about developments, programs coming where we can have a more effective academy leagues, because that's where you're going to give higher standards, and the youngsters coming through all the different academy ages, and then they'll come quicker into the process of the under 17 national team, under 20 national team, and coaches have to believe in young players. But they just have to have the more competitive level and a professional nature within the competitive structure.
Tashrik asks, so how do we get school soccer in the country on par with school rugby and school cricket in terms of how the sport has fed many players to eventually play for the Springboks and Proteas? Does it boil down to investment accompanied with necessary structures? Some of those top schools in the country have extreme structures in place to get their rugby and cricket at the highest level. Why in South Africa, where soccer remains the biggest sport, it's not recognized by top schools? I believe it'll help Bafana Bafana in the future, same as it helps with the Springboks and the Proteas.
That question is so valid. I spoke a little bit about it when I mentioned Ricardo Katza with Grey College. What he's done there, we need 60 Grey Colleges in our country. And we need those Kezers, we need those bishops, all those kind of instructors where they have, I'm talking in one area, okay, in one aspect, is that they have the facilities to grow those football. But we also need people in those institutions to look at football. It's one thing having those institutions around, because those institutions have done cricket and rugby for years and years and years. 100 years old, they've been playing cricket and rugby, but not football. So that's one aspect, where you have that environment which is conducive with the fields, the facilities and everything to back it up. Then there's the other side of things. The most talent comes out of the townships. How do we put those structures, identification structures within the townships, and then putting that, the Rabada. Where did Rabada come? He didn't come out of he come, out of those institutions, but first of all, he came from a township. So we've got to use that same infrastructure to identify the players and put them into academy structures that are going to develop those players at the highest level. And if it has to be all those institutions, school institutions, that's where it must be. We've got loads of great schools in this country, the Glenwoods, the Westvilles, the Marisburg colleges, and I'm just talking from a KZN perspective. So they're all over the country. In the Eastern Cape, they're all over the country. So we just need to get more of those institutions, like the Ricardo Katza has, the Grey College. We need to have more of those in our country. And then we can set up that same structure that you have where they play in those clusters within the province, and you bring them all together to play and formalize every third week or every second month, come together like they do with the rugby, bring them together in one facility and let them play against each other, go back 2 months later, come again, play against different schools, and that's maybe a way of doing it.
I see a lot of the schools, specifically here in Joburg, like the Cares, Parktowns, JPs, they've got quite good football structures. We've even got, we're getting more and more Cares boys playing now in the PSL and stuff, but it's nice to see that they're starting, but they're only starting. It's still a big thing. One of the complaints I get from some of those schools is that they've got, let's say, 3 teams per age group. And every weekend they want to have like the rugby structure where all 3 teams play against a certain opposition. And that works well when they play inter-school, like they travel to Grey College and play against Grey College. But how does that fit into the Safa and Safa kind of structures?
Well, that's what you want, you want to bring that environment. It's a different kettle of fish. And one thing that with the school structure, you as I spoke about earlier, you've got to bring the clusters. You've got to bring those clusters about and have one of these cares, like you brought up cares. Let's talk about just say cares. Taking ownership of a school in a township and providing transport, bringing them to their facility. And if you've got 10 schools taking ownership, maybe buddy system with a school that's lesser privileged, if I can say that, but have great quality in they'll be able to then give bursaries and that alike to those youngsters. And yeah, you've got to just bring it together and support one another. And I think that can be done, given also what I've said about giving a great infrastructure that these schools have.
Khanolo asks, looking at our national team and our top tier league, we're heading in the right direction in terms of development from schools level to international footballers with great educational background or academic achievements. I think like a team like Sundowns, Patrice Motsepe focuses very highly, and you see a guy like Percy Tau he's got his honours in business, if I'm not mistaken, and Patrice is actually focusing on the bigger development picture of his players, also because his players become more marketable because, as you said, they educated, they've studied certain things, so they know what to talk about within the club. So, I mean, what other clubs do that, and does Safa actually assist with that?
Yeah, Safa, the Safa bring players together individually within the national team. So it's very much the burden is on the club structure. What Patrice Motsepe has done effectively well is not only just from an educational point of view, he's brought in a financial side to it as well, so that the players can manage their resources, their financial resources better, because we've seen so many players that pass out of the game and then they don't have any financial resources to go back on. So that's what he's done effectively well. There's more that side of it taking place. But from a Safa's perspective, you only have 1 week for an international match. So it's very difficult for the Safa to bring that into the program. It's very much a burden on the clubs because they have the players all year round. They're there day in, day out, unlike Safa.
Just slightly off the schools topic, what do you think of the thoughts of ABSA Premiership season post-COVID break, the title chase and the relegation battle?
Look, I'm glad that it's finishing the season. You know, a lot of leagues all around the world never had the opportunity to finish the seasons, or they made decisions around just quitting the season then and there. I'm glad that the PSL has made that decision to finish the season in there was 8-9 games that were left to play, because you can always bring about, even if it finishes later, which it's going to do, and eat into the preseason, the normal preseason time frames. They'll only have to work less with the time frame of bringing them back into playing, because they are playing now and they're competitive now. So you could virtually finish, give them a week break, 2-week break, maybe get the new signings done, and then extend the signing period still, because it's a different. This COVID has brought about a different dimension to the game of football for this season. So finishing the season is important. Get your champions is vitally important, and then you can always build up. Start the new season late, but catch up with regards to playing weekend, midweek, weekend, like they are doing now.
Donna asks, what does South African football need to do to attract proper sponsorship investments? Teams struggle with this. How can we make South African football valuable to sponsors?
It's really, really difficult aspect, because, as I said, COVID has hit all works of the economy very, very harshly. Companies don't have the money they used to have just for their marketing and social responsibility programs anymore. They can't have their employees saying, okay, you're retrenching a whole lot of employees, but there you're going and sponsoring this tournament or sponsoring this club. It's a very much of a catch-22 situation, where you want to put your product out there, but at the same time you've got to manage your people within your company very effectively. So it's a very, very difficult scenario to balance. And this companies have been affected very, very harshly. The way I think we could maybe get some leeway into that is for the PSL to work together with Safa to work with the government, and to go into government and ask them for rebates on tax rebates, so that the money that they put into sponsorship for social responsibilities, to bring social programs and the sponsorship, it's totally deductible, or 80% deductible, whatever they can come about with their discussions. If they can make that, I think more and more companies will become part of putting their product out there. If they can get a total tax rebate or part thereof tax rebate, that's one way of effectively maybe getting sponsorship back into the game.
I think for individual teams, it's focusing on looking for your local, sponsoring your local area. So don't go to like spa as a group, but go to your local spa, that kind of a thing. And just getting 5 or 6 of those with that contribute R1,000 a month or something, and you actually end up building up quite a big sponsorship, like they do in the rugby, in rugby.
Well, certainly. Go look to your local butcheries, local sponsor shops, and let them become part of you. Let them take ownership and put some boards around your field, whatever. Put their logo on your shirt. Buy even if it's, as you say, it's just to cover the coach or to cover the buying of the jerseys or of your kit, balls, equipment. It seems like it's a very expensive game, but it's not. And as long as that equipment can last you 1-2 years, 2 seasons, look at your local businesses around your area.
Well, Refiwa asks, what is your advice to someone who wants to enter the football profession as an agent?
Yeah, the agents, it can be really, really difficult. It's not all glory in agents. They have a really, really difficult time because if you think of the number of players that, as I mentioned earlier, once again, that play the professional game, it's not hard. It's only a small percentage that where you can get into it, where they earn you a lot of money to find that gem. But it's not impossible. One area of the game that you should have an insight to or have some education is of the legal side, because being an agent is very based upon legal contracts. Excuse me. So the legal side, you have to have that background from a legal aspect, but also more so to know the environment of football, who you're dealing with. You can't just go ahead and have a meeting with Kaiser Matong and try to sell him a player if you don't know the environment, Kaiser Chiefs environment. I'm just using an example. And what's going in the marketplace and that. So it takes years and years. My discussion would be around, try find the agents that are around now, and as you would as a coach, piggyback on another coach, a more experienced coach. Go there once you've got your education, and that's the way you want to pursue your career. Go and piggyback on another agent, see how he's done, work for that company, see how it gets done, because there's many elements to becoming an agent. It's not all about just selling players. It's also about looking for sponsors for your players. It's also about how you're going to bring that holistical environment for your player. Develop your players as well. It's not just one from selling and buying of players.
And last question is from Norman from HTS Louisburg. He says, what age group does our national team development start? According to his experience, he went to a few countries in Europe and they started under 10 to prepare for the national team. He knows that like Grey College have got an under 6 to under 19, but unfortunately HTS Louisburg only starts at under 14 because they're a high school. They're one amongst the best schools that are competing in the Free State in the country as a whole. So, what age group does national development start in South Africa?
Look, as I said earlier, once again, 6 to 12 years of age is very, very much a development age group, having fun, and you're picking out individuals that will really show top quality. But I still believe that working from around 12, 13, where you put them, as I said, into clusters where you have what you can talk about, high performance centers, but you've got to be very, very careful of the age groups. You can't be trying to teach a 12-year-old a professional game. And yes, you can tickle different aspects into his play, make them aware of a professional environment. And that's where the clubs like Chiefs Pirates, which I was talking about earlier, where they have those youth development structures, those youngsters that are playing and enjoying themselves, they're already in that environment. They can see what the professionals are doing, what's expected of those professional players. But from a tactical aspect, very much a tactical aspect. It should start from about 13 years of age, 14, where you can put them in an environment where you start really putting their thought processes. And I'm just talking about really elite programs here. You're not all the age group, not all the players. You're talking about the ones that are really off top of their game. And then you start putting them into programs. So very much from the age of 13, 14, 12, 13, yeah, look, around that age. Primary school is far too young to start them, putting them into elite. Yes, they can do extra coaching, the better ones, but rather put them in a program, academy program from the age of 13, 14, right age, correct age.
Cool, thanks, Neil. Thank you so much for today. It's been actually an hour that could have gone on for many more hours. So thank you so much for answering all the questions and talking a little bit about your career. I have added a link to the webinar chat site where if you want to get Neil's book, it was released, just over a year ago. You can click on the link and you can buy Neil's book.